I just asked for some water, and my daughter shouted, "We are not your servants!" right in my face as I lay exhausted in the house I had paid for with my life, fresh from heart surgery. I, the father who had given everything for her happiness, felt a betrayal deeper than any pain. They thought they were unpunished and had power over me, but then I said, "You have 72 hours to leave this house. You will not believe what happened next." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Could you bring me a glass of water? The words left my mouth before I'd even settled into the armchair. 3 days in the hospital had left me parched in ways that went deeper than thirst. The surgical tape pulled at my chest with every breath, a constant reminder of what my heart had just endured. Haley froze in the kitchen doorway. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to something colder. "Seriously? I just got home from the hospital." My voice sounded weaker than I intended. The drive had exhausted me more than I'd expected, and now even this simple conversation felt like climbing stairs. She crossed her arms. The gesture was sharp, deliberate. "We're not your servants." The words hit harder than any physical blow. I stared at my daughter, searching for some trace of the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. Nothing. Her face held the same expression she might use on a stranger asking for spare change. I spent 3 days in the hospital after heart surgery. Each word came out carefully measured, as if speaking too quickly might tear something inside me. "I'm asking for water." Kayan didn't even look up from the television. The remote control rested in his lap like a scepter of indifference. Some game show blared laugh tracks, while my request hung unanswered in the air between us. "The kitchen's right there." Haley gestured vaguely toward the sink, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light streaming through the window. "You've got legs." I gripped the armrests and pushed myself up. The surgical site screamed in protest, sending sharp ribbons of pain across my chest. My vision wavered for a moment, and I had to pause halfway between sitting and standing. The stitches felt like they might split apart, leaving me bleeding on the carpet of my own living room. "Easy there, Dad." Haley's voice carried no warmth, just the kind of hollow concern people use when they don't want to appear completely heartless. "Don't want you falling and making even more work for us." More work, as if caring for the man who'd raised her was some unwelcome burden that had been thrust upon her. I thought about all the glasses of water I'd brought her during childhood fevers, all the midnight comfort when nightmares had stolen her sleep. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life. My legs shook as I took the first step toward the kitchen. Each movement sent jolts through my torso, but I refused to sit back down. Not now. Not when the truth was spreading across my vision like spilled ink on white paper. "This is ridiculous," Kayan finally spoke, his eyes still fixed on the screen, acting like he's dying or something. "It was just a little heart procedure." Little procedure. I'd flatlined twice on the operating table, but apparently that qualified as little in their world. The surgeon had explained the complications, the close calls, the miracle that I was even walking around. None of that seemed to register with the two people who should have cared most. The kitchen felt miles away instead of just across the room. Each step was a negotiation between my will and my body's limitations. Behind me, I could hear Haley's exasperated sigh, the kind she used to reserve for traffic jams and long grocery store lines. "Next thing you know, he'll want us to cook his meals too," she muttered to Kayan. "Don't give him ideas." Kayan's chuckle was dry, empty of any real humor. I reached the counter and gripped its edge. The cool surface steadied me while I processed what I'd just heard. These weren't temporary frustrations or stress-induced comments. This was who they really were when they thought I couldn't hear, or maybe they simply didn't care if I could. The glass trembled in my hand as I filled it from the tap. Water had never tasted so bitter, even though it was just ordinary water from the same faucet I'd used for 20 years. Everything was the same, yet nothing would ever be the same again. When I turned around, they were both watching me with expressions that mixed impatience with barely concealed disgust. My own daughter looked at me like I was some inconvenient stranger who had wandered into her house uninvited. The glass felt heavy in my hand, not from its weight, but from the weight of understanding that was settling into my bones like winter cold. I'd built this house with my own hands, paid for their education, their wedding, their car payments. I'd given them everything I had, and they couldn't even bring me water after heart surgery. I walked back to my chair slowly, deliberately, not because the pain demanded it, though it did, but because I needed time to think, time to plan, time to decide what kind of man I was going to be for whatever years I had left. The afternoon sun slanted lower through the windows, casting longer shadows across the room. Somewhere in those shadows, something was beginning to take shape. Something that would make them understand exactly what they'd lost when they decided I wasn't worth basic human kindness. I settled back into my chair and took another sip of water. It still tasted bitter, but now there was something else mixed in, something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming. Walking to my bedroom felt like crossing a desert. Each step sent aftershocks through my chest, reminding me that my body was still healing even if my illusions had just shattered completely. The hallway stretched longer than usual, family photos on the walls watching me with faces that suddenly seemed like strangers. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. The bedroom had always been my sanctuary, the place where my late wife Sarah and I had shared our dreams and plans. Now it felt like a refuge from my own family. The bed welcomed me like an old friend as I carefully lowered myself onto the mattress. My surgical site protested with sharp reminders of recent trauma, but the emotional wounds cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I stared at the ceiling, replaying those venomous words over and over. "We're not your servants." My own daughter had looked at me like I was some burden she had to endure. The same daughter whose college tuition I had paid without question, whose wedding had cost me nearly $20,000, whose car payments I had covered when Kayan lost his job last year. Memory has a way of flooding back when you need it most. 5 years ago, after Sarah's funeral, I had sat in this very spot making one of the biggest decisions of my life. The insurance money had been substantial, enough to buy something smaller for myself and help my daughter start her married life properly. I remembered driving to the real estate office, my hands shaking as I signed the deed transfer papers. The house, this house, had been my gift to Haley and Kayan. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a finished basement, and a yard where I had imagined future grandchildren playing. "Dad, this is too much," Haley had whispered that day, tears streaming down her face. "We can't accept this." But I had insisted. "Family takes care of family," I had told her. "Your mother would have wanted you to have security." Kayan had shaken my hand with what seemed like genuine gratitude, promising that I would always have a place here, that they would take care of me when I got older. Those promises felt like smoke now, dissipating in the harsh light of reality. The afternoon sun slanted through the curtains, casting familiar shadows across furniture I had bought decades ago. Everything in this room belonged to me once. Now it was all legally theirs, and they treated me like an unwelcome guest in what used to be my own home. I thought about the other gifts, the countless times I had opened my wallet without hesitation. When Kayan's business venture failed and they needed $5,000 to avoid bankruptcy. When Haley wanted to redecorate the kitchen and the estimate came to $8,000. When their car broke down and they needed something reliable right away. Every time I had said yes. Every time they had been grateful and loving, but somewhere along the way, gratitude had transformed into expectation, and expectation had hardened into entitlement. My chest tightened, though whether from the surgical site or from the weight of understanding, I couldn't tell. The pattern was so clear now that I wondered how I had missed it for so long. They had stopped seeing me as a person who chose to be generous, and started seeing me as an obligation-free source of money and support. The business cards in my wallet felt heavy with possibility. Michael O'Connor, attorney at law. I had used him for the house transfer and other legal matters over the years, a good man who understood family dynamics and financial planning. Sitting up took effort, but the decision was forming in my mind like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. I reached for the nightstand where I kept my address book, my fingers moving with more purpose than they had felt in days. There were options I hadn't considered before. legal options that might help them understand the true value of what they had taken for granted. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night of decision-making. I had called Michael O'Connor at 8 sharp, apologizing for the weekend disruption, but explaining that I needed urgent consultation on a family matter. His voice carried the same steady professionalism I remembered from our previous dealings. Of course, Mr. Richardson. Given everything you've been through with your surgery, I can be there by 10. Haley and Kayan had left for their weekly shopping routine around 9:30, their departure accompanied by the usual symphony of car doors and casual conversation that suggested nothing had changed in their world. Perfect timing. Michael arrived precisely at 10, carrying the same worn leather briefcase he'd brought to every meeting over the past decade. His gray suit spoke of weekend sacrifice, made without complaint, and his firm handshake reminded me why I had chosen him for important matters. Please sit wherever you're comfortable. I gestured toward the living room, grateful that my physical strength had returned enough to handle business properly. He settled into the chair across from mine, opening his briefcase with practiced efficiency. You mentioned family concerns on the phone. How can I help? I had rehearsed this moment during my wakeful hours, choosing words that would convey necessity without revealing too much emotion. I need to review the legal standing of the house gift I made to my daughter 5 years ago. Specifically, what options might exist if circumstances have changed significantly. Michael's eyebrows lifted slightly, but his expression remained professionally neutral. The property transfer to Haley, correct? Let me pull those files. Documents rustled as he arranged papers across my coffee table. The deed transfer, gift documentation, tax forms, all the paperwork that had seemed so straightforward when love and generosity guided my decisions. Now they look different, like maps to territories I hadn't known existed. The house is completely yours, Mr. Richardson. His words stopped me mid-thought. Excuse me. Legally speaking, you retain full ownership rights. Michael's finger traced across a specific paragraph in the deed document. The transfer was structured as a conditional gift with reversionary provisions, standard practice for family property transfers, actually. My heart rate increased, though whether from the surgery's lingering effects or sudden hope, I couldn't determine. What does that mean exactly? It means that while Haley holds title, the property reverts to you automatically under certain specified conditions. He turned the document toward me, pointing to dense legal text I had signed but never fully understood. Material change in circumstances, failure to provide agreed-upon care or housing, or breach of family obligations. The words swam before my eyes as their implications crystallized. 5 years ago, Michael had insisted on these protections, explaining them as standard safeguards that I had barely listened to in my eagerness to provide for my daughter's future. How quickly could such a reversion take effect? I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. With proper documentation of changed circumstances, 30 days from filing notice. Michael's tone remained matter-of-fact, as if we were discussing tax preparation rather than reclaiming my life. You would need to demonstrate material breach of the original gift conditions. I thought about yesterday's confrontation, about months of increasingly entitled behavior, about becoming a stranger in my own home. Material breach seemed like an understatement. What kind of documentation would be required? Witness statements, evidence of changed circumstances, documentation of breached agreements. Michael gathered the papers into a neat stack, though I should mention this would require careful consideration. Family property disputes can have lasting consequences. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Henderson from next door working in her garden, normal Saturday morning activities continuing while my world quietly shifted on its axis. The house felt different now, knowing that it was still legally mine, that I wasn't as powerless as I had believed. What would the timeline look like for gathering such documentation? That depends on what evidence exists and how quickly you want to proceed. Michael closed his briefcase but left the documents within my reach. Are we talking about immediate action, or are you exploring options for future consideration? The question hung between us like a bridge I hadn't yet decided to cross. In the distance, I could hear the familiar sound of a car approaching. Probably too early for Haley and Kayan's return, but it reminded me that my time for private planning had limits. I think, I said carefully, that I need to test whether the current situation might improve before making any irreversible decisions. Michael nodded with the wisdom of someone who had guided other families through similar crossroads. That sounds prudent. Perhaps we should discuss what that test might look like. Evening brought the familiar sound of car doors slamming and shopping bags rustling. I positioned myself near the kitchen sink, timing my presence to appear natural when they entered. The afternoon had been spent processing Michael's revelations, and now I felt ready to conduct my experiment. Haley pushed through the front door first, arms loaded with department store bags. Her designer sunglasses caught the hallway light as she kicked off her shoes, with practiced indifference. Kayan followed, juggling car keys and what looked like takeout containers. "How was your day out?" I asked, keeping my voice genuinely interested. "Fine." Haley's response carried the same dismissive tone I remembered from yesterday, but now I heard it differently. Not as a daughter's casual reply, but as evidence for a legal file. They moved through the living room toward the kitchen, and I waited until they had settled their belongings before making my request. Strategic timing mattered for this test. "Could you grab me a glass of water while you're up?" The question stopped Haley mid-motion as she reached for her purse. Her expression shifted from neutral to annoyed in the space of a heartbeat. "Can't you get up yourself?" Perfect. Almost exactly the same reaction as yesterday, but now I was prepared to push further. "I'm still recovering from surgery. It would really help." Kayan looked up from his phone with visible irritation. "You walked to the kitchen just fine. What's the big deal about walking a few more steps?" I maintained my calm tone, though internally I was cataloging every cruel word for Michael's documentation. "I was hoping you might show a little consideration for your father, who just had heart surgery." "Enough of this drama." Kayan's voice carried the edge of someone whose convenience had been threatened. "You're not an invalid. Stop acting like one." Haley nodded in agreement, her wedding ring glinting as she gestured dismissively. "Seriously, Dad, you can't expect us to wait on you hand and foot just because you had a medical procedure?" Medical procedure. As if my heart stopping twice on the operating table was comparable to getting a tooth cleaned. I stood slowly, making sure they could see the effort it took, the way my hand pressed against my chest, where the surgical site still ached. "I see." My voice remained steady, though something cold had settled in my stomach. "So asking for help from my family is unreasonable?" "When you can help yourself, yes." Haley's words came out sharp and final. "We're not your personal servants." There it was again. That phrase that had shattered my illusions yesterday now served as confirmation of what I already knew. They hadn't changed. If anything, they seemed more comfortable with their cruelty, as if yesterday's confrontation had given them permission to stop pretending. I walked to the sink and filled my glass, each step deliberate and measured. Behind me, I could hear them resuming their normal evening routine. Haley sorting through shopping bags, Kian settling into his favorite chair with the television remote. The water tasted exactly like it had yesterday, but this time I wasn't drinking it with the bitter taste of broken expectations. This time, I was drinking it with the satisfaction of a man who had just gathered the evidence he needed. "Did you find everything you needed while you were out?" I asked, returning to where they sat. "Most of it." Haley didn't look up from examining her purchases, though I'll probably need to go back next weekend for that lamp I wanted for the bedroom. Our bedroom, the bedroom in the house that legally belonged to me, where she was planning purchases with money that would better serve someone who actually deserved this place. Every casual assumption of ownership, every dismissive comment, every moment of callous indifference was building a case that Michael could use. I nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a good plan." Kayan glanced at me with suspicion, as if my reasonable response was somehow concerning. "You feeling all right? You seem different today." Different. If only he knew how different things were about to become. But that conversation would wait for another day, when I had all my pieces in position and 30 days' notice had been properly filed. "Just thinking about family," I said truthfully, "about what really matters." They returned to their evening activities, apparently satisfied that I had accepted my place in their hierarchy. The television flickered with some reality show where people competed for money they hadn't earned, which seemed remarkably appropriate. I finished my water and set the glass down carefully. Tomorrow I would call Michael again, 20 minutes later, I stood in the living room doorway and made my decision. I need you both to leave my house. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Haley's magazine slipped from her hands, landing on the coffee table with a soft thud. Kion's thumb froze over his phone screen, his expression shifting from casual indifference to sharp attention. "What did you just say?" Haley's voice carried a dangerous edge I had never heard before. "This is my house. I want you to pack your things and find somewhere else to live." Each word came out steady and clear, backed by Michael's morning revelation about my legal rights. Kion stood up slowly, his full height adding weight to his presence. "You're kidding, right? This is our home." "No," I replied calmly. "This is my home. I gave it to you as a gift, but that gift came with conditions." "You've broken those conditions." Haley jumped to her feet, her face flushed with anger and something that looked remarkably like panic. "You can't just kick us out. We live here. We have rights." "Actually, you don't." The confidence in my voice surprised even me. I spoke with my lawyer this morning. The deed transfer included reversionary clauses. When you fail to provide the care and respect that were part of our original agreement, ownership reverts back to me. The color drained from Haley's face as the implications hit her. No more free housing, no more financial safety net, no more taking everything for granted while treating me like an unwelcome burden. You're bluffing. Kion moved closer, his posture shifting into something more threatening. "You're just mad about yesterday, trying to scare us." "I'm completely serious. You have 30 days to find alternative arrangements." Kion's laugh held no humor whatsoever. 30 days? Where exactly do you think we're supposed to go? Do you have any idea how much rent costs these days? That's not my concern anymore. I remained standing, though the surgical site in my chest had begun to ache from the tension. "You made it clear yesterday and again today that caring for your recovering father is too much trouble. So I'm removing that burden from your lives." Haley stepped between us, her voice rising with desperation. "Dad, please, we can work this out. Maybe we were having a bad day, but we can change." "It's too late for that conversation." "You're not going anywhere!" Kion's shout echoed off the living room walls as he moved to block the doorway. "This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here making threats and demands like you own the place." "I do own the place." The statement hung in the air like a challenge none of us could take back. I watched as shock transformed into something much more dangerous in both their faces. This wasn't going according to any plan they had imagined. Haley grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in harder than necessary. "You need to sit down and think about this rationally. You're not thinking clearly since your surgery." "My thinking is perfectly clear." I tried to step around her, but Kion moved to block my path again. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice carried the unmistakable threat of physical confrontation. "To my bedroom to call my lawyer." "No, you're not." Kion reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone before I could react. "You're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this like adults." My heart rate spiked, sending sharp reminders through my chest that my body wasn't ready for this kind of stress. "Give me my phone back." "When you start making sense." Haley positioned herself on my other side, and I realized with growing alarm that they were coordinating their movements to control mine. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Can't what?" Kion interrupted. "Can't protect our family from your crazy old man threats? Can't make sure you don't do something you'll regret later?" They guided me toward the hallway, their grip firm but not quite painful. Yet, my surgical recovery had left me weaker than I wanted to admit, and fighting both of them simultaneously was beyond my current physical capabilities. "You're making a serious mistake," I warned as they steered me toward my bedroom. "The only mistake," Haley said, pushing open the bedroom door, "is letting you get this worked up over nothing." They guided me inside, and Kion pocketed my phone with the satisfied expression of someone who had just solved a complicated problem. "We'll talk about this tomorrow when you've calmed down," Haley announced. The bedroom door closed with a decisive click, followed by the unmistakable sound of the lock turning from the outside. 30 minutes of testing the door handle and examining the window had confirmed what I already suspected. I was thoroughly trapped. The lock held firm, and the window, while it opened, led to a 15-foot drop onto concrete. My surgical recovery made such an escape impossible, even if desperation might have otherwise driven me to attempt it. But the window offered something else entirely. Joshua Palmer was in his backyard, coiling up a garden hose as the evening light faded into that perfect suburban twilight. I had known Joshua for 3 years, ever since he'd moved in next door. A decent man who kept his property neat and always waved when we encountered each other at the mailbox. Pushing the window open wider, I positioned myself where he could see me. "Joshua, help me!" His head snapped up immediately, searching for the source of the voice. When his eyes found mine in the bedroom window, his expression shifted from confusion to concern in a heartbeat. "Peter, what's wrong?" He dropped the hose and moved closer to the fence line between our properties. "I need you to call the police." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but the situation had moved far beyond family disputes. "My daughter and her husband have locked me in this room and taken my phone." Joshua's face transformed into something I had never seen before, a mix of alarm and disbelief that told me he was processing information that didn't fit his understanding of normal neighborhood problems. "Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" "No ambulance, just police. I'm recovering from heart surgery, and they're using that to control me physically." I kept my voice steady, knowing that panic would make him less likely to take effective action. He was already reaching for his cell phone. "Hold on, Peter. I'm calling right now." Relief flooded through me as I watched him dial. This was working. Help was actually coming. 911. What's your emergency?" I could hear the dispatcher's voice clearly through his speaker. "I need police at—" Joshua looked up at me questioningly. 4715 Maple Street, I called down. "Tell them it's a family dispute involving unlawful confinement of an elderly man." Joshua repeated the information, adding details about my medical condition and the locked door situation. The dispatcher asked several follow-up questions, and Joshua looked to me for answers about whether I was in immediate physical danger and how long this had been going on. "Officers are being dispatched," the dispatcher finally announced. "Estimated arrival time is 8 to 10 minutes. Joshua ended the call and looked back up at my window. "They're coming, Peter. Do you want me to stay out here until they arrive?" "Yes, please." And Joshua, "Thank you. I know this is unusual. Don't worry about it." His voice carried the steadiness of someone who had made his decision and would see it through. "Is there anything else I should tell the officers when they get here?" Through the bedroom door, I could hear muffled voices from the living room. Haley and Kayan were talking, though I couldn't make out specific words. They seemed calm, probably discussing their next move or simply waiting for me to come to my senses, as they had put it. "Tell them this involves a property dispute," I said carefully. "My daughter and her husband are trying to prevent me from exercising my legal rights as the homeowner." Joshua nodded, absorbing this information with the seriousness it deserved. "Got it. Property dispute, unlawful confinement, elderly man with recent heart surgery." The sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance, though it was too early to be the police response. Still, my heart rate increased with anticipation. This nightmare was about to shift in my favor. "They should be here soon," Joshua called up reassuringly. From the living room came the sound of footsteps, and what might have been Haley's voice saying something about checking on me. The timing was about to become very interesting. I positioned myself near the door to listen while keeping sight of Joshua through the window. The next few minutes would determine whether my family's attempt to control me through physical intimidation would succeed or backfire spectacularly. "I can see a police car turning onto Maple," Joshua announced. Footsteps rushed down the hallway toward my door. The lock clicked open, and Haley appeared with a concerned expression that would have won her an Academy Award. "Dad, are you feeling all right? You seem agitated." Her voice carried the perfect blend of worry and confusion, as if she had found me in some kind of medical distress, rather than locked behind a door she had secured herself. "The police are here," I said, stepping past her into the hallway. "Police? Why would police be here?" Kayan emerged from the living room, his face a masterpiece of bewildered concern. "Did something happen?" Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Haley immediately took my arm, guiding me toward the front door with the gentle touch of a devoted daughter helping her fragile father. "Let me get that," she said, opening the door to reveal 2 officers, a man and woman in their 30s, both carrying the professional demeanor that comes with years of domestic calls. "Good evening. I'm Officer Edward. This is Officer Chloe." We received a call about a family dispute. There must be some mistake, Haley said, her voice perfectly pitched with confusion. We're just having a quiet evening at home. My father just had heart surgery, so we're being very careful with him. I stepped forward. Officers, I called you through my neighbor because my daughter and her husband locked me in my bedroom and confiscated my phone. Officer Chloe's eyes moved between us, noting the body language and positioning. Sir, can you tell us exactly what happened tonight? They physically forced me into my bedroom and locked the door from the outside when I told them they needed to leave my house. Each word came out clear and deliberate. Haley's hand flew to her chest in apparent shock. Dad, that's not what happened at all. You were feeling dizzy and confused, so we helped you to your room to rest. The door wasn't locked. You were just having trouble with the handle. The door was definitely locked, I insisted. Kayan moved closer, positioning himself supportively near Haley. Mr. Richardson has been having some confusion since his surgery last week. The anesthesia can affect elderly patients for days afterward. We've been trying to help him, but he's been making accusations that don't make sense. Officer Edward pulled out a notebook. Sir, when did you have this surgery? Monday, but I'm not confused. They locked me in that room because I told them to leave my house. Dad is just confused after the anesthesia, Haley said, her voice carrying the patient tone of someone dealing with a difficult medical situation. He's been saying strange things all day. We love him and we're trying to take care of him, but it's been challenging. Officer Chloe looked around the living room, which appeared completely normal. No signs of struggle, no evidence of the confrontation that had taken place an hour earlier. Mr. Richardson, do you feel safe in this house? Not when they lock me in rooms and take my phone? We didn't take your phone, Dad. Haley reached into her pocket and produced my cell phone. You left it on the kitchen counter. We were charging it for you. The smooth delivery of that lie stunned me. She handed the phone to Officer Edward, who examined it briefly before returning it to me. Mr. Richardson, have you been taking any pain medications since your surgery? Some, but I'm not confused or delusional. My voice carried increasing frustration as I realized how this was playing out. Officer Edward glanced at his partner. Ma'am, has your father been exhibiting any other signs of confusion or disorientation? Haley nodded sadly. He keeps insisting this is his house, and that he wants us to leave. But we live here. We take care of him. This afternoon he was demanding we bring him water, and getting very upset when we suggested he could get it himself. Because I just had heart surgery. We know, Dad. Kayan's voice was gentle, understanding, but the doctor said light activity was good for your recovery. We're just trying to follow medical advice. Officer Chloe took notes as she observed our conversation. Mr. Richardson, do you remember what you said to your neighbor tonight? Yes, because they had locked me in my room. He was confused about the door handle, Haley explained. The bedroom door sticks sometimes, especially for someone who's not at full strength yet. The officers exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to end. They saw an elderly man recovering from major surgery, possibly confused by medication, making accusations against family members who appeared concerned and caring. Folks, it seems like there might be some misunderstanding here related to post-surgical recovery, Officer Edwards said diplomatically. Mr. Richardson, if you feel unsafe or need help, you can always call us. But right now, I don't see evidence of any crime being committed. They stayed for another 10 minutes, asking basic questions and taking notes, but the outcome was predetermined from the moment Haley produced my phone and blamed everything on surgical confusion. After the officers left, the house fell into an ominous quiet. Haley and Kayan stood near the front door, their expressions transforming back to the cold calculation I had seen earlier. That was a very stupid thing to do, Kayan said, his voice carrying a threat that the officers had never heard. They locked me in my bedroom again, but this time they took everything from me, from my phone to my documents. The 90 minutes I spent in that bedroom gave me time to think, and my thoughts led me to a decision that my body would probably not like. The window beckoned me like a challenge I couldn't ignore. 15 feet to the ground. For a healthy person, it would be doable. But for someone who had undergone heart surgery 5 days ago, it could end in disaster. But remaining imprisoned in my own home seemed a worse fate than risking a fall. I opened the window as wide as possible, studying the fall. The landscape below offered some mercy. A flower bed with soft soil rather than concrete pavement. Small blessings for desperate people. From my daughter in her husband's room came the sounds of television. Laughter and casual conversation. Haley and Kaylin settled into their evening routine, confident that their performance in front of the police had solved the problem once and for all. That confidence would work to my advantage. Climbing out the window requires core strength, which heart surgery temporarily robs you of. Every movement sent sharp reminders through my chest, but the humiliation of being outsmarted by my own family burned hotter than any physical pain. I pushed one leg through the opening, then the other, until I sat on the windowsill like an elderly burglar planning the most pathetic robbery in the world. The ground seemed farther away from this angle, and I wondered briefly if despair always felt like this, like standing on the edge of something with no good options. The fall shook every bone in my body when I finally let go. Pain shot through the surgical incision like electricity, and for a moment I lay motionless in the flower bed, waiting to see if anything important had torn. When no immediate disaster announced itself, I struggled to my feet and brushed the soil off my clothes. Moving around the perimeter of the house required stealth that I hadn't needed since playing hide-and-seek as a child. Every step had to be calculated to avoid the gravel path and the motion sensor near the garage. The familiar landscape of my own property had turned into an obstacle course. At the front door, I crouched down carefully and lifted the doormat. The spare key was exactly where I had put it 3 years ago, a simple precaution that now seemed providential. My fingers trembled slightly as I inserted it into the lock. Whether from tension or excitement, I couldn't tell. The door opened silently on the hinges I had oiled myself last month. Inside, the house felt different than it had an hour ago. No longer a prison, but not quite a home either. Something in between. A battlefield where the first skirmish had gone badly, but the war was far from over. Voices drifted from the living room, relaxed and casual. They were discussing plans for the weekend, ordinary household conversations between people who believed they had successfully neutralized the threat. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so outrageous. I carefully made my way to my bedroom, avoiding the creaky floorboards and direct view from the living room. My goal was not confrontation, not yet. First, I needed access to my documents, my lawyer's contact information, and the legal weapons Michael had confirmed I had. The hallway stretched out before me like a path to reclaiming everything they were trying to take away. Each step brought me closer to the documents that would prove I was neither confused nor powerless, just temporarily outmaneuvered. In the living room lay the details of the deed, Michael's business card, and the detailed notes I had taken during our morning consultation. With these tools and my newfound mobility, the game could begin again, this time with different rules and a player who understood exactly what he was fighting for. They were about to find out how wrong they were. After gathering everything I needed, I returned to my bedroom. The next morning, climbing out the window as before, I headed to Michael's office, which that morning seemed like a sanctuary, polished wood and legal reference books embodying order in a world that had temporarily lost its balance. He agreed to meet me at 8, sacrificing his day off for a situation he clearly recognized as urgent. "Mr. Richardson, you look like you haven't slept much." He poured coffee from a thermos he had brought from home. "Tell me what's happened since yesterday." I explained the evening's events, the confrontation, the confinement, the police call that backfired spectacularly. Michael listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "So they physically locked you in your own bedroom and convinced responding officers that you were confused due to surgery?" His tone carried professional outrage that felt enormously validating. "Exactly. They're skilled manipulators, and they used my medical condition against me." Michael leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in the classic lawyer thinking pose. "This changes everything. What we discussed yesterday as a possibility has now become a necessity." He pulled out the folder from our previous meeting, spreading documents across his desk like a general planning a campaign. "The gift deed revocation we discussed, we're no longer talking about exploring options. We're talking about immediate action. How quickly can we proceed?" "Given the circumstances you've described, quite quickly." Michael reached for a thick legal reference book. Washington state law is clear about gift revocation in cases of ingratitude. When recipients treat the donor with hostility, cruelty, or fail to fulfill implied conditions of care, the gift can be legally revoked. The words fell on my ears like music. After 24 hours of feeling powerless, I was remembering what it felt like to have options. What exactly would the process involve? Michael opened his laptop and began typing. First, we prepare a formal notice of gift revocation. This document outlines the legal grounds, their hostile treatment, failure to provide reasonable care during your recovery, and the changed circumstances that justify reclaiming the property. And then, we serve them with the notice. They have 30 days to vacate the premises. His fingers continued moving across the keyboard as he pulled up legal templates and precedent cases. If they refuse, we can pursue immediate legal action for unlawful possession. The efficiency of legal machinery felt intoxicating after the chaos of family manipulation. Here were rules, procedures, deadlines, things that couldn't be argued away with crocodile tears and claims of post-surgical confusion. What if they contested? They can try, but the burden of proof shifts to them to demonstrate that their treatment of you was reasonable and that they fulfilled the implicit conditions of the gift. Michael's smile carried the confidence of someone who had seen this type of case before. Given what you've described, and particularly the incident with the police, I doubt they'll want this matter examined in detail by a court. Michael spent the next hour drafting documents, explaining each section as he worked. The formal legal language felt like armor, protection against the emotional manipulation that had nearly cost me everything. The notice of gift revocation will be ready for service tomorrow morning, he announced, printing multiple copies on official letterhead. I recommend having it served by a professional process server, rather than attempting to deliver it yourself. And if they try to claim I'm mentally incompetent, that's actually working in our favor now. Michael gathered the documents into a neat stack. Their claim to the police that you were confused due to surgery could be seen as elder abuse, using your medical condition to dismiss legitimate concerns about your property rights. The irony was perfect. Their manipulation strategy had created evidence of the very behavior that justified gift revocation. How long before this is final? Assuming they don't contest, and I suspect they won't once they understand the legal reality, you could have full possession back within 60 days. Michael sealed the documents in an official envelope. However, the psychological impact will be immediate. They'll realize that their control over this situation was always an illusion. Standing to leave, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Friday afternoon. Genuine optimism. The law was on my side. I had professional representation. And my family was about to learn that treating your elderly father like an inconvenience carries consequences. Michael, I can't thank you enough for meeting me today. Mr. Richardson, what happened to you this weekend was unconscionable. I'm glad we can correct it. He handed me the envelope containing copies of the legal documents. I'll call you tomorrow once the process server has been scheduled. Walking toward the office door, I realized that everything had changed. I was no longer a confused old man making baseless accusations. I was a property owner exercising his legal rights with professional representation and due process of law. The drive home would give me time to plan exactly how I wanted to handle the next phase of this situation. Monday morning brought clarity and official documents printed on Michael O'Connor's letterhead. I stood in the living room holding papers that would change everything, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what had always been mine. Haley was in the kitchen making coffee, moving with the casual confidence of someone who believed she owned the house around her. Kian sat at the dining table scrolling through his phone, probably planning his day without any awareness that his world was about to collapse. Haley, Kian, I need you both in here. My voice carried an authority they hadn't heard before. Not the confused, pleading tone of a sick old man asking for water, but the firm command of someone holding all the cards. They exchanged glances as they moved into the living room. Haley's expression showed mild annoyance, as if I were interrupting something important, rather than about to deliver the most significant news of their adult lives. I held up the documents, making sure they could see the official letterhead and formal legal formatting. These are eviction notices. You have 72 hours to remove yourselves and all your belongings from my property. The silence that followed was profound. Haley's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips, suspended in disbelief. Kayan's phone screen went dark as his grip loosened. "What are you talking about?" Haley's voice carried the first hint of uncertainty I had heard from her since Friday. "I'm talking about the legal reality you chose to ignore." I unfolded the first document and began reading. Notice of gift revocation. Pursuant to Washington state property law, the undersigned property owner hereby revokes the gift deed executed in favor of Haley Richardson on the grounds of material ingratitude and breach of implied conditions. Kayan stood up abruptly. "You can't be serious. This house is ours. We live here. You lived here at my discretion, which you forfeited when you decided to treat me like an unwelcome stranger in my own home." I continued reading from the legal document. Specific grounds include hostile treatment of the grantor, failure to provide reasonable care during medical recovery, and deliberate confinement against the grantor's will. Haley set down her coffee with shaking hands. "Dad, this is crazy. You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go." "That's not my concern anymore." The words felt liberating. "You had the opportunity to treat your recovering father with basic human decency. Instead, you chose cruelty and manipulation." "But the police said you were confused." Kayan's voice rose with desperation. "You were having post-surgical problems." "The police said what you convinced them to say. My lawyer was very interested in that detail when I explained how you used my medical condition to dismiss my legitimate concerns about property rights." Reading the legal consequences aloud gave each word extra weight. Failure to vacate within 72 hours will result in formal eviction proceedings and potential charges of unlawful possession. Haley sank into the chair, her face pale. "You actually went to a lawyer?" "I went to my lawyer, the same one who handled the original gift deed 5 years ago. He was fascinated to learn how you've been treating the grantor of your free housing." "Dad, please." Haley's voice cracked with the first genuine emotion I had heard from her since this began. "We can work this out. We can change. I know we've been difficult, but we can fix this." 72 hours. I folded the documents back into their official envelope. "Starting now." Kayan moved closer, his posture aggressive. "You think you can just threaten us? After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done for me?" The irony was breathtaking. "You locked me in a bedroom and convinced police officers I was mentally incompetent." "Exactly what have you done for me?" "We let you live here," Haley protested. "You let me live in my own house." I placed the legal documents on the coffee table where they couldn't ignore them. "The house I bought with my own money and gave to you as a gift, thinking you would provide the love and care that justified such generosity." The room fell quiet, except for the sound of Haley's increasingly rapid breathing. The papers sat between us like a bridge they couldn't cross, separating their old world of entitlement from the new reality of consequences. "Where are we supposed to go?" Kayan asked, his voice smaller now. "That's something you should have considered before deciding I wasn't worth basic human kindness." I moved toward the hallway, leaving them to process their new circumstances. 72 hours. The clock is ticking. Behind me, I could hear Haley beginning to cry, and Kayan's voice rising as he started making urgent phone calls. The sound of their panic was the sweetest music I had heard in years. But I wasn't finished with them yet. They still didn't understand the full scope of what they had lost, or why this house had meant so much to me in the first place. Tuesday afternoon found us sitting around the kitchen table like a family again, though the dynamic had shifted completely since Monday morning. Haley's eyes were red from crying, and Kayan looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. The eviction notice lay between us like a ticking bomb. "Dad, please." Haley's voice carried a desperation I had never heard before. "We know we made mistakes. We know we treated you badly, but we can change. We can be the family you deserve." I sat quietly, letting her words fill the space between us. On the table in front of me lay a manila folder I had retrieved from my filing cabinet that morning, documents they had never seen before. "We were stressed about your surgery," Kayan added, leaning forward earnestly. "We didn't handle it well, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. This is our home, our family." "Your home?" I repeated thoughtfully. "Tell me, Haley, do you remember how I was able to buy this house?" She wiped her eyes with a tissue. "You said you had saved money from your contracting business." "That's partially true. But where do you think the down payment came from? A house this size, in this neighborhood, that required substantial money up front. Haley and Kaon exchanged glances. I don't know. Your savings? I opened the manila folder and spread several documents across the table. Official letterhead from Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company. Death certificates. Beneficiary claim forms, all dated 5 years ago. This house was bought with the insurance money from your mother's death. The silence that followed was absolute. Haley stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. Her face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror that was painful to watch. The life insurance policy your mother maintained for 20 years, specifically to provide security for our family. I pointed to the beneficiary designation form, $350,000, paid out 6 months after the funeral. Haley's hands trembled as she picked up the insurance documents. But you said, you never told me. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel guilty about living in a house that your mother's death had purchased. I wanted you to see it as a gift from a loving father, not as something bought with tragedy. Kayan reached over to read the papers over Haley's shoulder. I don't understand. Why are you telling us this now? Because I want you to understand exactly what you've done. My voice remained calm, but each word carried the weight of 5 years of grief and planning. This house, where you locked me in a bedroom, where you told the police I was mentally incompetent, where you refused to bring me a glass of water after heart surgery, was purchased with money from your mother's life insurance policy. Haley made a sound that was part sob, part gasp. The insurance papers slipped from her fingers and scattered across the table. She died believing she was providing security for our family. She talked about it during her final weeks, how the insurance money would make sure we always had a safe place to live, that we would take care of each other. I gathered the documents back into a neat pile. She made me promise to use that money to keep our family together. Dad, I didn't know. Haley's voice broke completely. You didn't know because I protected you from that knowledge, just like your mother protected us with that insurance policy. Just like I protected you by giving you this house as a gift instead of telling you it was purchased with your mother's sacrifice. Kaon put his arm around Haley as she began to cry in earnest. We can fix this. We can honor her memory properly. Can you? I asked quietly. Can you undo treating me like an unwelcome stranger in a house that your mother's death provided? Can you take back telling police officers that I was confused and incompetent in the home she intended as our family sanctuary? Haley looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I had no idea. Your mother would be heartbroken to know that the house she thought would bring our family together became the place where her daughter chose cruelty over compassion. I stood up from the table, leaving the insurance documents where they lay. She would be devastated to learn that her final gift to our family was used as a weapon against the father she loved. The weight of moral reality settled over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about legal ownership or family disputes anymore. This was about violating the sacred trust of a woman who had died, believing her sacrifice would protect the people she loved most. What can we do? Haley whispered. How can we make this right? I looked at my daughter, my broken, desperate daughter who had finally understood the full scope of what she had lost, and felt something that might have been pity mixed with the satisfaction of justice finally served. You have 44 hours, I said simply. Thursday afternoon brought the sound of cardboard boxes being taped shut and furniture being moved across hardwood floors. I sat in my recliner watching Haley and Kaon work with the quiet efficiency of people who had finally accepted their fate. The past 50 hours had transformed them completely. Gone was the arrogance, the entitlement, the casual cruelty that had defined our relationship since my surgery. In its place was something I had never seen from them before, genuine remorse mixed with the hollow exhaustion of people who had learned what it meant to lose everything. Kayan carried the last of their boxes through the living room, avoiding my eyes as he had for the past 2 days. Haley followed with a suitcase, her movements careful and deliberate, as if she were walking through a house that might collapse at any moment. That's everything from upstairs, she said quietly, setting the suitcase near the front door with the rest of their belongings. I nodded but didn't speak. There wasn't much left to say that hadn't already been said Tuesday afternoon, when the insurance papers had shattered their world into pieces they couldn't put back together. The house keys lay on the coffee table between us, still attached to the keychain Haley had bought when I first gave her the house 5 years ago. A little silver charm that read, "Home Sweet Home." Ironic now, considering how sweet this home had proven not to be for the man who had made it possible. "Dad," Haley said, approaching my chair with the hesitant steps of someone who wasn't sure they had the right to speak, "I need you to know that I understand what we did. What I did." I looked up at her, my daughter who had spent the last 72 hours coming to terms with the fact that she had been cruel to her father in a house that her mother's death had purchased for their family's security. "I know you do," I replied. Kayan appeared in the doorway, car keys in his hand. "Everything's loaded. We're ready to go." Haley picked up the house keys from the coffee table, holding them for a moment, as if they weighed more than metal and plastic had any right to weigh. When she handed them to me, her fingers trembled slightly. "These belong to you," she whispered. The keys felt warm in my palm, though whether from Haley's touch or from the symbolic weight of reclaimed ownership, I couldn't tell. "They always did." She nodded, understanding the deeper truth in those words. This house had always been mine. Legally, morally, and in every way that mattered, she had simply been allowed to live here through my generosity, a generosity she had repaid with contempt and cruelty. "I'm sorry about Mom," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm sorry we dishonored her memory in the house she provided for us." "Your mother would have wanted you to treat me with love and respect," I said calmly. "She would have been heartbroken to see what you chose instead." Kayan stepped forward, extending his hand toward me. "Mr. Richardson, I want you to know that I take full responsibility for my part in this. I supported Haley's behavior, and I participated in treating you badly. That was wrong." I shook his hand briefly. "Now you know what it means to lose a home." The words carried the weight of perfect justice. They had made me feel unwelcome in my own house, had treated me like a burden in the place where I should have felt most secure. Now they would learn what it felt like to be homeless, to have no place that was truly theirs. They walked toward the door together, Haley pausing at the threshold to look back one final time. "Will you ever forgive us?" "That's not the question you should be asking," I replied. "The question is whether you'll remember this lesson well enough to treat the next person with the kindness you should have shown me." The door closed behind them with the soft click of finality. Through the window, I watched them load their remaining belongings into their car and drive away from the property that would never again be their home. Silence settled over the house like a comfortable blanket. For the first time in almost a week, I was alone in my own home, without the weight of family tension or the threat of being treated like an unwelcome stranger in my own domain. I looked down at the keys in my hand, then at the insurance papers still scattered across the coffee table. Sarah would have been proud to see justice finally served, to know that her sacrifice had ultimately protected the family she had loved, even if it had taken longer than anyone might have expected. Walking through the rooms of my house, truly my house again, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my surgery. Peace. Not the peace of revenge, but the deeper satisfaction of justice properly served and lessons properly learned. Outside, the spring afternoon continued its gentle progression toward evening, and I was home. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. My neighbor's desperate warning shattered my world. "Run while you can. Your son and his wife are monsters." I asked him, "What did they do?" He revealed the terrible truth, which made my legs buckle, and I almost fainted from shock. This truth changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The Henderson contract lay scattered across my mahogany desk like fallen leaves. 23 years of building Ramos Logistics, and now they were pulling out. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, the cream forming an ugly film on top. I pushed my reading glasses up my nose and stared at the cancellation notice again, hoping the numbers would somehow change. "Effective immediately," the letter read. $2 million in annual revenue. Gone. I leaned back in my leather chair, feeling every one of my 67 years in my shoulders. The desert sun blazed through my office blinds, casting harsh lines across the financial reports. My jaw clenched as I calculated the damage. 3 employees would have to go. Maybe 4. The phone's shrill ring cut through the afternoon silence like a knife. I almost let it go to voicemail. The last thing I needed was another client calling with bad news. But the caller ID made me freeze. Milton, my son. 3 years since our last conversation. 3 years since he stormed out of this very office, shouting about my lack of faith in his dreams. I stared at the phone, my finger hovering over the answer button. Hello? Dad. His voice was softer than I remembered, uncertain. I know we haven't talked in forever, and I know that's mostly my fault, but... I waited. The Henderson contract suddenly seemed less important. Flossie and I, we want to invite you over. We've missed you. Martha's photo smiled at me from the corner of my desk. She always said I was too stubborn, too hard on the boy. When were you thinking? Maybe this Friday? We'll make a great dinner. I've been wanting to show you the house, and Flossie's become quite the cook. He paused. I owe you an apology, Dad, for how things ended between us. The fight came rushing back. Milton at 35, asking for $50,000 to invest in some app that would revolutionize transportation. His face when I'd said no, when I'd told him to get a real job instead of chasing fantasies. You never believed in me, he'd shouted. I believe in hard work, not get-rich-quick schemes. The door had slammed so hard it rattled the windows. Martha's last photo had fallen off the wall that day. I've missed you too, son. The words came out rougher than I intended. I'll drive up Friday morning. Really? That's wonderful. We live in Beverly Hills now. I'll text you the address. Beverly Hills. The boy had done well for himself, apparently. Maybe I'd been wrong about him after all. Maybe Martha's gentle voice had been right, as usual. After hanging up, I sat in the silence for a long moment. The Henderson contract still lay before me, but it felt smaller somehow, less devastating. Family trumped business every time. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out my good luggage, the set Martha and I used for our anniversary trips. From my jewelry box, I selected the Rolex I'd been saving for a special occasion. Milton had always admired it. For Flossie, I chose the diamond earrings Martha wore to our wedding. She'd want them to stay in the family. The drive would take about 6 hours if I left early. I folded clothes carefully into the overnight bag, hands steadier than they'd been all week. Business problems could wait. My son was reaching out, and this time I wouldn't let pride get in the way. I carried my bags to the Cadillac, the 1995 DeVille, that had served me faithfully for decades. The leather seats were worn but comfortable, like an old friend. As I loaded the trunk, the Arizona sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Tomorrow, I'd see Milton again. Tomorrow, we'd start rebuilding what we'd lost. I placed the last bag in the trunk and looked toward the horizon, where California waited beyond the desert. Friday morning arrived with desert clarity. I backed the Cadillac out of my driveway at 9 sharp, the engine purring with satisfaction. Phoenix spread behind me in the rearview mirror, a sprawling testament to dreams built in harsh places. The interstate stretched ahead like a promise. Route 10. West had been my companion on dozens of business trips over the years, but today felt different. Today carried hope instead of obligation. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught sight of my own eyes, bright with anticipation I hadn't felt in months. The radio crackled to life as I merged into traffic. Eagles filled the cabin with Hotel California, and I found myself humming along despite the irony. The air conditioning battled the climbing heat as Phoenix gave way to open desert. By 11, I was deep in Arizona's heart, where civilization thinned to gas stations and truck stops. The landscape stretched endlessly in shades of beige and brown, punctuated by the occasional Joshua tree reaching toward an impossibly blue sky. This stretch always made me think of Martha. She'd loved these drives, claimed the emptiness helped her think clearly. All that space gives your soul room to breathe, she'd say, her hand resting on mine over the gear shift. A memory surfaced unbidden. Milton at 12, bouncing in the back seat of this same Cadillac as we drove to Roosevelt Lake for a camping weekend. Martha had packed enough food for an army, convinced we'd starve in the wilderness 30 minutes from town. Dad, when can I drive? Milton had asked, leaning forward between our seats. When you're tall enough to reach the pedals without sitting on a phone book, I'd laughed. That's not fair. Tommy's dad lets him steer on their ranch. Tommy's dad has more land and fewer traffic laws to worry about. At the lake, I'd taught him to cast a line, his small hands gripping the rod with fierce determination. Martha had taken pictures of us holding up a base that was honestly too small to keep, but we'd posed like we'd landed Moby Dick. Later, she'd laughed until she cried, watching us try to cook dinner over our pitiful campfire. You two couldn't start a fire if your lives depended on it, she'd gasp between giggles. We're learning important survival skills, I'd protested, but I was laughing too. Those were golden days. Before teenage rebellion, before college arguments, before the business fights that drove us apart. When had it all gotten so complicated? The gas gauge dropped steadily, and I pulled into a station in Quartzsite. The elderly cashier looked up from his newspaper as I entered, sweat beading on my forehead despite the air conditioning. Visiting family in California? He asked, ringing up my fuel purchase. My son. Haven't seen him in years. His weathered face creased into a smile. Family's everything. You're doing the right thing. The validation felt like cool water on sunburned skin. I walked back to the Cadillac with lighter steps. The California border appeared around 2 o'clock, marked by agricultural inspection stations and the first palm trees. The landscape began its subtle transformation from desert brown to coastal green. Traffic thickened as I approached the Los Angeles sprawl, luxury cars appearing with increasing frequency among the travel-worn sedans and trucks. My old Cadillac suddenly felt shabby among the gleaming BMWs and Mercedes that populated the lanes around me. Beverly Hills money moved differently than Phoenix money, apparently. The GPS on my phone guided me through increasingly affluent neighborhoods. Manicured lawns replaced desert landscaping. Swimming pools sparkled behind high walls. This was Milton's world now, far removed from the middle-class Phoenix neighborhood where he'd learned to ride a bike. Had I held him back somehow? Had my emphasis on practical work over big dreams limited his possibilities? Maybe this success proved I'd been wrong. Maybe the boy I'd raised had simply needed room to grow beyond what I could provide. Traffic crawled through Beverly Hills proper. Rodeo Drive appeared and disappeared in my peripheral vision, a street I'd only seen in movies. My palms grew damp on the steering wheel despite the air conditioning. The GPS announced distances in hundreds of feet now instead of miles. In 1 mile, turn right on Palm Drive. My heart rate picked up. 3 years of silence were about to end. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, smoothing my gray hair and adjusting my collar. The gifts sat securely in the passenger seat, wrapped in the good paper Martha always insisted on saving for special occasions. In 500 feet, turn right on Palm Drive. The white modernist villa rose before me like something from an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the afternoon sun, creating a mirror maze of light and shadow. A circular driveway curved around a central fountain, its water catching rainbows in the spray. Palm trees stood sentinel along the perfectly manicured lawn. I parked the Cadillac and sat for a moment, taking it in. Milton had done more than well for himself. This was wealth on a scale I'd never imagined, certainly nothing my logistics company could have provided. Pride and intimidation warred in my chest as I gathered the gift bags from the passenger seat. The front door was solid oak with brass fixtures that gleamed like jewelry. I rang the doorbell and heard chimes echo inside, a melody that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Through the frosted glass, I could make out movement shadows, furniture shapes, the suggestion of opulence, but no footsteps. I waited, adjusting my tie and smoothing my shirt. The desert heat seemed different here, humid with sprinkler mist and swimming pool evaporation. After a full minute, I knocked firmly on the door. "Milton? Flossie?" My voice carried across the quiet street. "It's Dad." Silence answered back. I checked my watch. 3:20. Maybe they were running late, caught in LA traffic, or finishing last-minute dinner preparations. I rang the bell again, holding it longer this time. The melody played its expensive song to empty rooms. A security camera tracked my movement from its mount near the door. Red light blinked steadily, recording my growing confusion. I waved at it awkwardly, feeling foolish. "Hello?" Anyone home? The quiet stretched unbroken. No television sounds, no cooking noises, no voices calling that they'd be right there. Just the fountain's gentle splash and the distant hum of affluent neighborhood life. I walked around the house perimeter, gift bags growing heavy in my sweating hands. The backyard was a paradise of pool and patio furniture, outdoor kitchen gleaming unused under its canvas cover. Through sliding glass doors, I glimpsed a living room that belonged in a luxury hotel lobby. Everything perfect, everything expensive, everything empty. The back door was locked tight. Returning to the front, I pulled out my phone and dialed Milton's number with unsteady fingers. It rang 4 times before switching to voicemail. You've reached Milton Ramos. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Milton, it's Dad. I tried to keep the worry from my voice. I'm at your house like we planned. Where are you? Call me back. I tried Flossie's number next, though I barely knew her. We'd spoken maybe 3 times in Christmas calls over the years. Hi, this is Flossie. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back soon. Flossie, it's Samuel. I'm here for dinner. Please call me back. The street remained tomb quiet, except for gardeners working across the way. Their leaf blowers provided the only signs of life in this perfect neighborhood. A security patrol car cruised past slowly, the driver giving me a long look that made me feel like an intruder. I sat down on the front steps, setting the gift bags beside me. The concrete was warm through my pants, but shade from the portico provided some relief. This had to be a misunderstanding. Traffic delays, maybe an emergency at work. People didn't invite their estranged fathers to dinner just to abandon them on doorsteps, did they? My phone remained stubbornly silent. No return calls, no text messages explaining the delay. The fountain's cheerful splash began to sound mocking. 4 o'clock came and went. The sun shifted, removing my shade and leaving me exposed on the steps like a piece of unwanted furniture. Sweat soaked through my shirt despite the California breeze. My leather shoes felt tight and uncomfortable on the unfamiliar concrete. Other houses on the street showed similar signs of expensive emptiness. Closed gates, pristine driveways, the peculiar silence of wealth that insulates itself from the world. I'd never felt more out of place, sitting on steps that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe Milton had meant next Friday, not this Friday. Maybe my eagerness to reconcile had made me hear what I wanted to hear instead of what he'd actually said. But no, he'd specifically mentioned this Friday, and Flossie had sounded excited about the dinner plans. My heart began to sink toward familiar territory, the same disappointment I'd felt when Milton missed my 60th birthday, the same hollow ache from when he'd skipped Martha's funeral service, patterns repeating themselves despite hopeful promises. I stood up slowly, knees protesting after the long sit. The gift bags felt heavier now, weighted with foolish optimism. Maybe it was time to accept that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, that 3 years of silence had created a gap too wide for phone calls to cross. The Cadillac waited patiently in the driveway, faithful as always. I could drive home tonight, be back in Phoenix by midnight if I pushed it, return to my own problems, my own world where I understood the rules and expectations. I was reaching for my car keys when I heard footsteps rushing toward me. Wait! Don't go in there! The voice came from behind a perfectly manicured hedge. I spun around, nearly dropping the gift bags, as a thin man emerged carrying an electric hedge trimmer. His gray hair was disheveled, thick glasses sliding down his sweat-slicked nose. Excuse me. I steadied myself against the Cadillac's hot metal. I think you're confused. He glanced nervously toward Milton's house, then back at me. Sir, you need to leave. Now. Those people are dangerous. The man looked to be in his early 50s, wearing a grass-stained polo shirt and dirty gardening gloves. His nervous energy made my skin crawl, but not as much as his words. This is my son's house, I said firmly. I think you've made a mistake. His face went pale. Your son? Oh, no. You're the father they mentioned. Ice ran down my spine, despite the California heat. What are you talking about? Who mentioned me? He set down the hedge trimmer and stepped closer, lowering his voice to an urgent whisper. Your son and his wife, they killed her father, poisoned him. That's impossible. The words came out louder than I intended. You must be mistaken. $5 million in inheritance. He died right after visiting them, just like you're doing now. My legs felt unsteady. This is ridiculous. My son would never... He was healthy as a horse when he came here for dinner. A week later, he's dead. The man's hand shook as he spoke. I'm Larry, by the way. I live right there. He pointed to the house next door. I've been watching this place since it happened. People die of natural causes all the time, I protested, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Natural causes don't make you vomit in someone's driveway. Larry's eyes darted toward the security cameras mounted on Milton's house. The neighbors saw him leave here pale as death, throwing up before he even reached his car. The gift bag slipped from my sweating palms, landing on the hot concrete with a soft thud. The expensive wrapping paper crinkled, looking suddenly foolish in the harsh afternoon light. You're telling me my son is a murderer? The words felt foreign in my mouth. I'm telling you to leave before you become the next victim. Larry backed toward his hedge, clearly terrified of being overheard. That woman, Flossie, there's something cold about her. And your boy, he's changed since he married her. My heart hammered against my ribs. 3 years of estrangement suddenly took on a darker meaning. What if Milton had changed? What if the money troubles I'd refused to help with had driven him to something unthinkable? How do you know about the inheritance? I heard myself ask. Small neighborhood. People talk. Her father was loaded, lived alone in Pasadena, healthy 70-year-old who played golf twice a week. Larry's voice dropped even lower. One dinner with his new son-in-law and daughter, boom, dead within days. The business part of my brain, the part that had built a successful company, through careful risk assessment, started cataloging details. Wealthy older parent. Recent marriage. Sudden death after family visit. The pattern made terrible sense. But this was Milton. My son. The boy I'd taught to fish, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd once brought home a stray dog because he looked lonely. I have to warn you because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't, Larry continued. But I've said all I can say. That's all I can do. He grabbed his hedge trimmer and started backing toward his own property, casting fearful glances at the cameras tracking our conversation. Wait, I called after him. What about the police? What about them? Rich people die. Happens all the time. No investigation when there's no evidence. He paused at his gate. Just don't eat or drink anything they offer you. And don't stay the night. I watched Larry disappear behind his hedge, leaving me with questions that made my stomach turn. The driveway felt like a furnace under my feet. I paced back and forth beside the Cadillac, my mind racing faster than my heart. Larry had to be wrong, delusional, maybe senile, or harboring some grudge against Milton and Flossie. My son wasn't capable of murder. The boy who'd cried over roadkill couldn't poison another human being for money. Could he? I picked up the fallen gift bags, their cheerful wrapping now mockingly bright. The Rolex inside had been meant as a peace offering, a symbol of renewed trust between father and son. Now it felt like evidence of my own naivety. 3 years. 3 years of silence after our fight about money. What had happened to Milton in that time? Who had he become? The memory of our last argument crashed over me with new significance, his desperation when asking for $50,000. I need this investment, Dad. My future depends on it. The wild look in his eyes when I'd refused. You'll regret not believing in me. At the time, I dismissed it as the tantrum of a spoiled adult who'd never learned the value of hard work. Now those words carried a different weight, a threat, maybe, rather than a prediction. I pulled out my phone and tried Milton's number again, straight to voicemail, the mailbox now full. Flossie's phone rang endlessly before clicking to the same cheerful recording I'd heard an hour ago. Where were they? If this dinner invitation was genuine, why weren't they answering their phones? Why had they left me sitting here for over 2 hours? The house loomed before me, its white modernist facade no longer impressive but imposing, fortress-like. The security cameras seemed to track my every movement, red lights blinking like mechanical eyes. How many people had those cameras recorded in their final hours? Martha's voice echoed in my memory. You're too hard on the boy, Samuel. Milton has your ambition, but not your patience. Be careful not to push him too far away. Had I pushed him toward this? Had my harsh criticism and refusal to support his dreams created the desperation that led to murder? But that was insane. People didn't kill for money, especially not their own family members. Except they did. The news was full of such stories: inheritance disputes, insurance policies, elderly parents found dead under mysterious circumstances. I set the gift bags on the Cadillac's hood and leaned against the warm metal. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but I barely felt it. My thoughts were too loud, too chaotic. If Larry was telling the truth, then Milton and Flossie had invited me here to kill me. The loving son's voice on the phone, the talk of missing me and wanting to reconcile, all lies. A performance designed to lure me within striking distance. But if Larry was lying or mistaken, then I was standing here like a paranoid fool, destroying my only chance at rebuilding the relationship with my son. $5 million. That's what Larry had said Flossie inherited from her father. Enough money to buy this house, fund Milton's lifestyle, make all his financial problems disappear. Enough money to kill for. My phone buzzed. A text message. My heart leaped until I saw it was from my business partner in Phoenix, asking about the Henderson account. The outside world, my normal life, seemed impossibly distant now. I checked the time. Almost 5:30. The sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific, painting the Beverly Hills mansions in golden light. Beautiful and deadly, like everything else in this neighborhood. A car engine hummed in the distance, growing louder. My pulse quickened. Someone was coming down the street, and in a neighborhood this exclusive, it could only be residents or their guests. The engine sound grew more distinct. Expensive, smooth, not the rumble of my aging Cadillac, but the purr of German engineering. I had maybe 30 seconds to decide. Get in my car and drive away, proving I didn't trust my own son, or stay and smile and hug Milton when he arrived, possibly signing my own death warrant in the process. A silver BMW turned into the driveway, and I had to decide whether to smile and hug my son or run for my life. The BMW's engine whispered to a stop behind my dusty Cadillac. Tinted windows concealed the occupants for a moment that stretched like eternity. I forced my face into what I hoped resembled a relieved smile, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The driver's door opened first. Milton emerged in clothes I'd never seen him afford. Tailored slacks, silk shirt, leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He looked prosperous, healthy. Nothing like the struggling man who'd called me 3 years ago, begging for money. "Dad!" His voice carried genuine warmth as he strode toward me with open arms. "I'm so sorry we kept you waiting. Traffic was murder getting back from downtown." Murder. The word hit me like a slap. Poor choice of words or calculated cruelty. "We had some legal business to wrap up," he continued, pulling me into an embrace that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. "Boring stuff, but you know how these lawyers are." Legal business? Wills, maybe? Estate planning? I returned his hug while my mind catalogued every detail for future analysis. The passenger door opened and Flossie stepped out like a model posing for a magazine. Perfectly styled blonde hair, designer dress that hugged her figure, handbag that cost more than some people's monthly rent. She moved with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being watched and admired. "Samuel?" She approached with arms extended, her smile bright enough to power the neighborhood. "You're even more handsome than your photos. Milton showed me so many pictures from when he was growing up." She touched my arm as she spoke, a gesture that would have seemed friendly an hour ago. Now it made my skin crawl. I studied her face for signs of guilt, for cracks in the performance, but found only enthusiasm and warmth. "I hope you brought an appetite," she continued. "I've been cooking all afternoon. Your favorites. Milton told me all about your love for pot roast and Martha's dinner rolls." How did she know about Martha's dinner rolls? Milton must have shared more family memories than I'd realized. The intimacy of that knowledge felt like a violation. "The drive wasn't too rough, was it?" Milton asked, glancing at my travel-worn appearance with what seemed like genuine concern. 6 hours is a long haul, especially in this heat." "Not too bad," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "The Cadillac handles it well." "She's a classic," Milton said, running his hand along the car's faded paint with apparent appreciation. "Remember when you taught me to drive in this old girl? I was so scared I'd scratch her." The memory was real, warm, innocent. It belonged to a different life, before suspicions and accusations, and the terrible possibility that my son had become a stranger, capable of murder. I picked up the gift bags from the car hood, my hands trembling slightly. I brought you both something, just small tokens. Dad, you didn't have to do that. Milton's eyes lit up with what looked like genuine pleasure. You being here is gift enough. Flossie clapped her hands together like a delighted child. Oh, how sweet. But first, let's get you inside where it's cool. You look overheated, and I've got iced tea waiting. Iced tea. My throat was parched from the heat and stress, but Larry's warning echoed in my mind. Don't eat or drink anything they offer you. They flanked me as we walked toward the front door, Milton carrying one of my bags despite my protests, Flossie chattering about the neighborhood and their renovations, the perfect host and hostess, welcoming a beloved family member. The front door opened with an electronic beep. Keypad entry, I noticed. Expensive security system, the kind that could keep people out or keep them in. The interior took my breath away. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, designer furniture arranged with museum precision, art on the walls that looked original and expensive. Every surface spoke of money. Serious money, the kind that transformed lives overnight. We've done some updating since we moved in, Milton said with obvious pride, giving me the tour like a real estate agent. The kitchen was completely gutted and rebuilt. Flossie has very specific ideas about cooking spaces. Or specific needs for food preparation that required privacy and control. It's beautiful, I said honestly. You've both done very well for yourselves. We've been lucky with some investments, Milton replied, but something in his tone suggested the conversation was closed. Come on, let me show you the living room. The view of the canyon is incredible. They led me deeper into their palace, their voices cheerful and welcoming, their movements casual and confident. If this was an act, it was flawlessly performed. If it was genuine, then Larry was a paranoid neighbor with too much time and too little sense. But as I followed them toward the kitchen, the expensive house felt less like a home and more like a beautiful trap. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking toward the kitchen where Martha used to hum while cooking our family dinners. I walked toward the kitchen, thirsty and suspicious, while Flossie hummed quietly over the stove, the same tune Martha used to sing while cooking our family dinners. Martha's melody followed me into the gleaming kitchen like a ghost from happier times. Flossie stood at the professional-grade stove, her back turned, stirring something that smelled of garlic and herbs. The tune she hummed twisted my heart. My dead wife's favorite song, now coming from the throat of my potential killer. Just getting some water, I announced, opening what seemed like the obvious cabinet for glasses. Crystal stemware caught the light, expensive pieces that belonged in a museum rather than a kitchen. Everything here screamed money, the kind of sudden wealth that raised questions. Glasses are in the upper cabinet, Samuel, Flossie called without turning around. Found them, thank you. My hand reached for a simple water glass, but the cabinet door swung wider than intended. Behind the cleaning supplies, a small brown bottle caught my eye. My business instincts, honed by decades of risk assessment, immediately flagged it as wrong. Dish soap and window cleaner didn't require pharmaceutical containers. I glanced at Flossie, still busy at the stove, humming Martha's song like a mockery of family memories. The bottle felt cold in my palm. The label faced me clearly, as if fate wanted me to read every word. Potassium cyanide, handle with extreme care. Warning symbols covered half the space. A skull and crossbones grinned up at me like death's business card. Time stopped. Larry had been right. They really were trying to kill me. My hands shook, nearly dropping the evidence. Every thriller movie I'd ever seen, every news story about family murders, suddenly became real and personal. This wasn't fiction or distant tragedy. This was my son planning to poison his own father. How much did it take? A few drops? A teaspoon? The label warned of extreme danger, which meant even small amounts could be fatal. My businessman's mind calculated while my father's heart broke into pieces. The cooking sounds continued behind me. Flossie chopping, stirring, completely unaware that I'd found her murder weapon. She probably thought herself clever, hiding it behind everyday items where no one would look. But I had looked, and now I knew. I forced my trembling hands to replace the bottle exactly where I'd found it, positioning it behind the same cleaning products. The cabinet closed with a soft click that sounded thunderous to my ears. Every movement had to appear natural, casual, the actions of a thirsty father-in-law helping himself to water. The tap ran cold water into my glass while my mind raced through implications. $5 million in inheritance money, a house worth millions, a lifestyle neither Milton nor Flossie could afford through legitimate means. The pattern was clear now. They'd killed before, and I was next on their list. "How's the water, Samuel?" Flossie's voice carried false concern. "Perfect, thank you." I turned from the sink, glass in hand, watching her move around the kitchen with new eyes. Every gesture now seemed calculated. Every smile hid murder. She'd killed her own father, and now she was helping my son plan my death. The irony burned. She was humming Martha's favorite song while preparing to send me to join my wife in the grave. But knowledge was power. They thought I was an unsuspecting victim, a lonely old man desperate for family reconciliation. They had no idea their plan was already discovered, their weapon identified, their intentions exposed. I took a long drink of water, buying time to think. How many people had stood in this same kitchen, trusting these same smiles, only to die within hours? How many family dinners had become execution chambers? The humming continued. That beloved melody turned sinister by its new singer. I turned from the sink with my water glass, knowing that everything Flossie was preparing, including our family dinner, was now potentially deadly. The living room felt different now, like a theater stage where everyone performed roles except me. Milton looked up from his magazine as I returned, his smile the same one I'd taught him to use on customers when he was 12. "Found what you needed, Dad?" "Yes, thank you." "Beautiful kitchen." The words came out steadier than I felt. "You've both created something special here." I chose the leather armchair with a clear sightline to the kitchen doorway. Milton didn't question my positioning, too focused on playing the perfect host. From here, I could observe Flossie's movements while maintaining conversation. "Tell me about this LA real estate market," I said, needing Milton's attention directed away from my surveillance. "Seems like you've done well for yourselves." "We've been lucky with some investments," Milton replied, the same vague explanation from earlier. "The key is knowing when to take risks." Through the doorway, Flossie moved between counter and stove with practiced efficiency. Multiple wine bottles sat opened on the marble island, expensive reds that would have impressed me an hour ago. Now they looked like props in an elaborate murder scene. "Samuel, do you prefer red or white?" she called from the kitchen. "Whatever you recommend," I replied, watching her select a bottle of Cabernet that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries. Milton launched into a discussion of California wine regions, while I maintained appropriate responses. But my attention stayed locked on the kitchen, where Flossie poured 3 glasses of deep red wine. She set 2 glasses aside, near the window. The third remained by the stove. My heart hammered against my ribs as she glanced toward the living room, checking our positions. Milton was deep in his wine expertise monologue, gesturing with his hands, completely unaware his wife was preparing to commit murder. Flossie reached into the lower cabinet, the same one where I'd found the poison bottle. Time dilated as she retrieved the small brown container. Her movements were quick but careful, practiced. This wasn't her first time. She'd done this before, probably in this same kitchen, maybe to her own father. Clear liquid dripped into the wineglass closest to the stove. 1 drop. 2. 3. A gentle swirl mixed the poison with the Cabernet, creating what looked like an innocent glass of expensive wine. The bottle disappeared back into its hiding place among the cleaning supplies. "The Napa Valley producers really understand terroir," Milton was saying, his voice seeming to come from underwater. "That's what separates good wine from great wine." Great wine mixed with deadly poison, I thought, watching Flossie arrange the glasses on an elegant serving tray. The poisoned glass held its position. I memorized exactly which one she'd doctored. She was humming again, Martha's song, the same melody my wife used to sing while cooking Sunday dinners for our small family. Now it accompanied preparation for my execution. "Gentlemen, dinner is served." Flossie's voice carried theatrical warmth as she emerged from the kitchen carrying the tray of wine. Milton jumped up with enthusiasm. Finally, I'm starving. I rose more slowly, cataloging the positions of everything that mattered. The poisoned glass sat on the right side of the tray, closest to where Flossie's hand gripped the handles. She knew exactly which one would be mine. This has been too long in coming, Milton said, his arm around my shoulders as we walked toward the dining room. Family should stick together. Family. The word tasted bitter now. My son was leading me to dinner, like a lamb to slaughter, his voice full of warmth, while his wife carried liquid death in crystal stemware. The dining room table gleamed under chandelier light, set with china that belonged in palaces. 3 place settings waited for us, perfect in their symmetry, beautiful and deadly, like everything else in this house. As we approached the dining table set with fine china that reflected the chandelier light, Flossie placed the tray of wine glasses at the center, including the one meant to be my last drink. Candles flickered across polished mahogany as Flossie directed our seating, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of death. The dining room belonged in architectural magazines, crystal chandelier casting rainbows through wine glasses, each piece of china worth more than my employees' weekly salaries. Samuel, you sit here at the head, she gestured toward the chair furthest from any exit, place of honor for our special guest. Milton took his position to my right, Flossie to my left. They flanked me perfectly, cutting off escape routes, while maintaining the illusion of family intimacy. The choreography felt rehearsed. Let's toast to family reunions, Milton said, lifting his wine glass with theatrical enthusiasm. Flossie raised hers in perfect synchronization, to healing old wounds and new beginnings. My glass sat within easy reach, the candlelight making the poisoned Cabernet look like liquid rubies, beautiful and lethal. I could smell the wine's rich aroma from where I sat, no trace of the poison that would kill me within minutes of consumption. I appreciate the gesture, I began, my voice steadier than my pulse, but I've stopped drinking alcohol. Milton's expression shifted, surprise replacing expectation. Since when? You used to enjoy wine with dinner. Doctor's orders. Blood pressure medication doesn't mix well with alcohol. The lie came easily, believable for a man my age dealing with stress and health concerns. Flossie's smile faltered for just a microsecond, but I caught it. The tiny crack in her performance revealed frustration beneath the hostess facade. Of course, health comes first. Milton recovered quickly, but his glance toward Flossie carried meaning. They'd rehearsed this scenario, prepared for obstacles. Flossie makes incredible fresh juice, he continued, his voice carrying forced enthusiasm. Apple cranberry blend. You'll love it. The wink he gave his wife might have seemed playful to an unsuspecting observer. To me, it confirmed they'd moved to Plan B. Whatever waited in that kitchen blender would be just as deadly as the wine I'd refused. I'll get some immediately, Flossie said, rising with renewed energy. Her disappointment had transformed into determination. While she busied herself in the kitchen, Milton filled the silence with nervous chatter about Los Angeles lifestyle and business opportunities. His pace had increased, words tumbling together as he checked his watch repeatedly. We have exciting plans for tomorrow, he mentioned, and then caught himself. I mean, we hope you'll consider staying longer, maybe see more of the city. Plans that assumed I wouldn't survive the night. The blender whirred from the kitchen, running longer than necessary for simple juice preparation. I engaged Milton in questions about house renovations, while listening to every sound, refrigerator opening multiple times, glasses clinking, liquid pouring. The preparation process seemed unnecessarily complex. This is our signature blend, Flossie announced, returning with an elegant glass pitcher filled with dark red juice. Ice cubes floated alongside orange and cranberry garnish, professional presentation masking murder. Samuel, you must try this. She poured a generous glass, her movements precise and practiced. Both of them watched my reaction with intensity that felt oppressive. Their eyes tracked my every gesture, waiting for me to lift the glass to my lips. It looks delicious, I said carefully, but I'm quite full from the water. Maybe with dessert? I don't want to spoil my appetite for this beautiful meal. Milton's insistence came immediately. Come on, Dad, just a small sip. Flossie worked so hard on it. The pressure escalated with each refusal. Their desperation began showing through cracks in their performance. Milton's voice pitched higher, Flossie's hands tense as she hovered near my chair. Please, Samuel, Flossie's tone carried pleading undertones. Just a taste. For me? Her positioning felt predatory, ready to react if I continued resisting their hospitality. They'd invested too much in this evening to let me leave without consuming their poison. I pushed back from the table with what I hoped looked like satisfied contentment, rather than strategic retreat. Excuse me, I need to use the restroom before we continue this wonderful evening. As I stood, I saw Milton and Flossie exchange a look that confirmed what I already knew. They had no intention of letting me leave this house alive. The hallway stretched before me like a lifeline. Family photos lined the walls. Milton's graduation, wedding pictures, vacations to Europe. Images of happiness built on blood money now. Each step toward the bathroom felt measured, calculated. Too fast would signal panic. Too slow might test their patience. Just need to freshen up before dessert, I called back, my voice carrying the right note of elderly politeness. The bathroom door closed behind me with a soft click. I turned the lock, the sound unnaturally loud in the small space. For the first time in hours, I was alone, with my knowledge and my terror. My phone emerged from my pocket with trembling hands. Full signal strength, thank goodness. I dialed 911 with the volume turned to its lowest setting, pressing the device close to my ear. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Samuel Ramos, I whispered. My son and daughter-in-law are trying to poison me. Sir, can you speak louder? Are you in immediate danger? Yes, but I must whisper. I'm hiding in their bathroom. They've poisoned my drinks twice tonight with potassium cyanide. The dispatcher's tone sharpened immediately. What's your location? I provided the Beverly Hills address, my voice barely audible above the sound of my own heartbeat. Through the door, I could hear Milton and Flossie talking in normal tones, probably discussing my bathroom break and their next move. I found the poison bottle in their kitchen, I continued. I watched her put it in my wine and juice. They killed her father the same way last year for inheritance money. Sir, stay on the line. Officers are being dispatched. Are there weapons in the house? I don't know about guns, but the poison is enough. They think I'm just using the facilities. How many people are in the house with you? 2. My son Milton and his wife Flossie. They're waiting for me to return so they can try again. The dispatcher's professional calm steadied my nerves. Officers will be there in approximately 20 minutes. Can you stay safe that long? 20 minutes. An eternity when you're performing for your life. I'll need to go back and act normal or they'll suspect something. The poisoned drinks are still on the dining table. The cyanide bottle is under the kitchen sink behind cleaning supplies. Don't touch anything else. Let the officers collect evidence. Keep your phone accessible but not obvious. I flushed the toilet and ran water in the sink, creating authentic bathroom sounds. In the mirror, my reflection looked older than my 67 years, but my eyes held determination I hadn't felt since Martha's death. What if they try to force me to drink something? Refuse everything. Create any excuse. Help is coming, Mr. Ramos. I understand. I'm going back now. The connection ended. I slipped the phone into my pocket, took a deep breath, and prepared to perform the role of my life. The unsuspecting father, grateful for family reconciliation, unaware that dessert would be my last meal. Milton's voice carried through the door. Dad, you okay in there? Dessert's ready. Coming right out. I opened the bathroom door and walked back toward the dining room, knowing that in less than 20 minutes, this house of lies would be filled with police officers, and my son's life would be over forever. The dining room felt like a stage where I performed my final act. Flossie had arranged an elaborate apple pie, steam rising from golden crust that would have looked appetizing hours ago. Now it represented another potential murder weapon. Samuel, I made this especially for you, she announced, knife poised over the dessert. Your favorite, Milton told me. It looks absolutely wonderful, I managed, checking my watch discreetly. 15 more minutes. But I'm quite full from that delicious dinner. Let me digest first. Milton's enthusiasm felt forced. Come on, Dad, just a small piece. Flossie spent all afternoon on it. I deflected with practiced ease. Tell me about your neighborhood first. I saw some beautiful homes driving in. The real estate market here must be incredible. The conversation bought precious time, but I could see frustration building behind their smiles. Milton checked his phone repeatedly. Flossie's grip on the serving knife tightened with each passing minute. Then salvation arrived in the form of car doors slamming outside. Milton frowned toward the front window. That's strange. Sounds like a lot of cars. Heavy footsteps crossed the walkway. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by authoritative knocking that made the expensive front door rattle. "I'll get that," Milton said, confusion replacing his dinner party charm. Flossie followed him toward the entrance while I remained seated, my heart pounding with relief and anticipation. "LAPD, we received a call about a possible poisoning incident at this address." Milton's voice cracked with shock. "Poisoning? There must be some mistake, officer." I stood up and walked toward the foyer, where 3 uniformed officers filled the doorway. Their presence transformed the elegant entrance into a crime scene. "Officers, I'm Samuel Ramos. I made that call." The color drained from Flossie's face like water from a broken glass. Milton's confusion shifted to horror as understanding dawned. "Dad, what did you do?" "I called for help when I discovered you were trying to murder me," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been all evening. The lead officer stepped forward. "Mr. Ramos, where are the items you mentioned?" I gestured toward the dining room. "The poisoned wine and juice glasses are on the table. The potassium cyanide bottle is in the kitchen, under the sink behind cleaning supplies." Milton's desperate denials filled the air. "This is insane! We would never hurt my father. He's confused, possibly having some kind of episode." But Flossie remained silent, her calculating mind already working on damage control. Her silence spoke louder than Milton's protests. 2 officers moved toward the dining room while a third headed for the kitchen. Within minutes, they were photographing evidence and carefully bagging the poisoned beverages I'd refused to consume. "The cyanide bottle is exactly where he described," called the kitchen officer. Milton's face went white as the implications hit him. The evidence was undeniable, physical, damning. "Sir, you're under arrest for attempted murder," the lead officer announced, producing handcuffs. "Dad, please," Milton's voice broke as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. "Tell them this is all a mistake." I met his eyes for what I knew would be the last time. "You stopped being my son when you decided to murder me for money." Flossie's arrest proceeded with professional efficiency. She offered no resistance, no pleas, just cold calculation of her odds. As they read her rights, I saw only hatred in her eyes when she looked at me. Larry appeared from his house next door, drawn by the police cars and flashing lights. "I warned him earlier about these 2, he told the officers. "Something was very wrong here." "Thank you," I said to Larry, as Milton and Flossie were loaded into separate patrol cars. "You saved my life." The neighbors had gathered on the street, drawn by the spectacle of wealth and privilege crumbling under police lights. The house that had seemed so impressive hours earlier now looked like what it truly was, a monument to murder, funded by blood money. As the police cars pulled away with my son and his wife in custody, I stood in the driveway where I'd arrived with such hope just hours earlier, knowing that justice was only beginning, and the hardest part, living with the truth about my family, still lay ahead. The months between June and September passed in a blur of legal meetings, evidence reviews, and sleepless nights. I sold my logistics company to cover legal expenses and the emotional toll of testifying against my own son. The Phoenix house held too many memories of the family I thought I'd known, so I rented a small apartment in Los Angeles to be available for the prosecution. Media attention followed everywhere. Phoenix businessman survives son's murder plot. Larry remained my anchor to sanity, visiting regularly and reminding me that survival sometimes requires impossible choices. September 15th arrived with California sunshine streaming through the Superior Court windows. The courtroom's wood paneling and formal atmosphere couldn't diminish the surreal nature of watching my son and daughter-in-law at the defendant's table, their expensive lawyers whispering strategies. The prosecution's case unfolded with methodical precision. The poison bottle, exhibited to the jury with its clear warning labels. Laboratory analysis confirming cyanide in both wine and juice glasses. Financial records showing Flossie's convenient inheritance and subsequent spending spree. Larry testified about his warnings and suspicions. His nervous energy on the witness stand reminded me of that afternoon when he'd rushed from behind his hedge to save my life. Then came my turn. "Mr. Ramos, please tell the court what happened on the evening of June 20th. I recounted the discovery in the kitchen cabinet, watching Flossie poison my drinks, the desperate bathroom phone call. The jury listened with rapt attention as I described performing for my life, while my would-be killers served dinner. The defense attorney tried to portray me as a confused elderly man, perhaps suffering from paranoid delusions, but my business background and clear recollection of events undermined their strategy. "Mr. Ramos," the prosecutor asked, "are you certain about what you witnessed?" "I saw her add poison to my drink with my own eyes. My son invited me to dinner to kill me for my money." The words hung in the courtroom air like an indictment of everything family should represent. Expert testimony followed on cyanide's lethality and proper storage protocols. Financial forensics revealed the inheritance money timeline. Most damning investigators had reopened the case of Flossie's father's death, finding suspicious similarities. The defense's desperation showed in their closing arguments, grasping at explanations for household poison, storage, and misunderstood dinner preparations. But the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, deadly. 6 hours of jury deliberation over 2 days felt like an eternity. When they returned, the foreman's solemn expression told the story before he spoke. "We find the defendants guilty on all charges." Relief and heartbreak collided in my chest. Justice had been served, but the cost was everything I'd believed about family. The judge's sentencing was swift and final. Milton received life imprisonment without parole for attempted murder and conspiracy. Flossie got life for her father's murder and the attempt on mine. The $5 million inheritance was ordered returned to her father's estate. As they led Milton away in shackles, he made one final, desperate appeal. "Dad, I never meant for it to go this far." "You stopped being my son when you chose money over love," I replied, the words cutting through years of false hope and willful blindness. Flossie maintained her cold silence to the end, showing no remorse, no recognition of the lives destroyed by her greed. I walked down the courthouse steps into California sunshine, feeling simultaneously empty and free. The drive back to Phoenix represented more than geographical transition. It was a journey toward whatever remained of my life. The desert landscape looked different now, cleaner somehow, as if the truth had burned away illusions like morning fog. Larry had helped me pack, promising to visit once I settled back home. I used part of the recovered inheritance money to establish a scholarship fund for students studying business ethics. Martha would have approved of turning blood money into something constructive. Sitting in my Phoenix living room months later, surrounded by photos that now told a different story, I understood that survival isn't just about avoiding death. It's about rebuilding life after trust dies. Justice was served, but the cost was everything I thought I knew about family. I learned that sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those we love most, and the greatest strength comes from surviving it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.